Agriculture Committee will come to order. Thank you for joining us today. Would the clerk please take the attendance?
Chairwoman Miller.
Here.
Representatives Pice.
Present.
Stone.
Here.
Young.
Here.
Kofia. Devendorf.
Here.
Fitzgerald. Here. Reingens.
Here.
Meyer.
Here.
Vanderwall.
Present.
Roth.
Here.
Bierlein.
Here.
And Smith.
Present.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Rep. Pice moves to adopt the minutes. We will now have a presentation from Doug Chapin and also Sheila Burkhart with the Michigan Milk Producers. Good morning. Thank you for coming today.
Good morning. Do I have this on properly? Okay, all righty.
Please introduce yourselves.
Yes. Well, good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Sheila Burkhart, and I serve as the Corporate Affairs Officer for Michigan Milk Producers Association. I've been with MMPA over 30 years and grew up on a dairy farm on the west side of the state and work with a lot of our member and government programs. And I'll let Doug introduce himself.
And I'm Doug Chapin, a dairy producer from Mecosta County. I milk about 700 cows with my wife and my son in a partnership up there. I also serve as the chair of Michigan Milk Producers, and I'm really looking forward to talking with you today.
So we have a few slides that we wanted to go through, but I guess ask questions as we go if you would like, or we'll save time at the end of our time period.
Until the end of
Okay.
the presentation.
All right, that sounds good.
So I'd like to start out with just showing where Michigan's relevance is within the nation. And we rank 6th in the nation in dairy production. And I also highlight that with saying that the dairy industry provides about 40,000 jobs within the state. So as far as milk production per cow, Michigan ranks number 1, and we lead the nation in milk production per cow. And I'd like to correlate that with actually how well we work with the land-grant university here at Michigan State, and also how innovative and quick our producers are to adopt new technologies. On this slide here, it shows the growth of the dairy industry within Michigan in the last 20 years. And the message really here is really that we've increased our milk production over 100%, but yet we've only increased the footprint of agriculture by 40%. So really highlighting the efficiency of the Michigan dairy farmer. So Michigan is a great place to dairy. We have a good environment. We have good water. We have a very good infrastructure throughout the state that is important to access markets and to access feed. And we also have good proximity to a lot of population centers. I just wanted to highlight kind of the process that we go through in milk production. And on the farm, you know, we start with cows that are treated very humanely and cows that are on diets that are individually balanced and with a nutritionist. From the time that cow is milked, you know, every load of milk is tested for antibiotics. Every tank of milk is tested for antibiotics, and I can clearly say all milk is antibiotic free. But from the time it is milked, that milk has to get cold fast. By law, under 45 within 2 hours. By practice, I'd say 95% of it is under 36 within 2 minutes. Human hands never touch milk, and it just continually moves through pipelines and like that. But yeah, you can go to the next one. From the time it is picked up from the dairy farm and goes through the processing system, it will go from the cow to the store if it's bottled milk in less than 3 days. And it's a very fast process, all aimed at quality and safety to our consumers. But from the cow to the store is about, 36 hours is a pretty safe number.
And then just to give a little bit of background information on Michigan Milk Producers Association, our organization is a dairy farmer-owned cooperative. We're over 100 years old. MMPA was formed back in 1916, and it was formed by a group of dairy farmers at the time that wanted to find a better way to market their milk. Instead of trying to find a place each day to send their milk, they formed MMPA to take care of the marketing of their milk for them. So we've grown quite a bit over the years, to the point where we're processing over 5 billion pounds of milk every year. We're well known for the quality of milk here in Michigan, and particularly within MMPA. Each year there's a National Dairy Quality Award program, and MMPA members each year have been making up the majority of those National Dairy Quality Awards. We have some award-winning dairy products produced at our plants, and in terms of size, volume of milk that we market each year, we rank 10th in the U.S. as far as the size of our dairy cooperative. And like I said, we were formed back in 1916. We were formed when dairy farmers met at Ag Hall at MSU. So we've had a very close tie to MSU over the last 100-some years, and working with a lot of the programs that MSU has. And so our relationship there has continued. And as I mentioned, we are dairy farmer owned. Our board of directors consists of all dairy farmers. And we have farms not only in Michigan, the bulk of our farms are in Michigan. We also have farms in Indiana, Ohio, and Wisconsin. And we employ about 600 people throughout the organization. And we operate 4 manufacturing plants. This is a picture and a list of all of our quality award recipients that I mentioned before. These are the ones that were awarded the National Quality Awards back in January. So some of you may see some familiar names up there, but I wanted to provide that list for you. This is an overview of where our facilities are located. Our headquarters is in Novi, Michigan. We have a manufacturing plant in Ovid, just north of here, that processes about 5 million pounds of milk, primarily produces butter and non-fat dry milk products at that plant. We have a plant down in Constantine, Michigan. It's a dairy ingredient plant, primarily making ultra-filtered milk. We have a cheese plant in northern Indiana that produces cheese. And then in Canton, Ohio, we purchased a Superior Dairy, and that acquisition took place last year. And that's primarily fluid milk products that are produced at that plant. This is a list of all of the different ingredients that we produce at our plants, from fluid product, butter, to ice cream down at the Canton plant, including cheese. You won't necessarily see the MMPA logo on a lot of the products out there in the dairy stores, but we supply a lot of customers that you might be familiar with. And I put a list of some of the buyers of our products, not all of them, but just to give you an idea of those that do purchase MMPA products, from powders to butters and creams.
So Michigan Milk does have a commitment to sustainability, and we are part of the National Milk Producers Federation initiative to be carbon neutral by the year 2050. We also work in other areas on sustainability, from animal care to workforce, and all with the goal to improve the community and to improve our industry. Dairy is in a very good place right now. We always hear a lot of news that fluid milk consumption is in the decline, and that has been true over the last several years. But dairy consumption overall has been growing, primarily because of cheese and yogurts. But the consumers are hungry for high-quality dairy products, and that's pretty clear in this slide here that shows the per capita consumption. So another big player in the dairy industry is export and the access to exports. Last year was actually a record year for the dairy industry and exporting in both volume and value. And so far this year through February, we are still pacing ahead of the previous year. So we may not hit value this year because the prices are down, but it looks like we will hit and increase volumes again this year. So who are our big customers? This lists them: Mexico, Southeast Asia, Canada, China, and South America. It's very important that the dairy industry has access to these markets and access to other markets. We do believe that the U.S. can grow as a supplier to the world, especially a world that is looking for high-quality proteins. And as we've seen other parts of the world, maybe the industry is matured or not growing. The dairy industry may not be in a growth mode. We do think that the U.S. can step in and help be a provider of these high-quality proteins in other markets. So the value of exports is pretty clear, and the countries we serve is pretty clear, but that says 1 out of every 6 gallons is exported. Last year it was closer to 1 out of 5, and we think it will hit 1 out of 5 soon. But 1 out of 6 is a pretty safe number. We were at over 18.5% last year exported. The dairy industry does represent a lot of jobs, and a lot of these jobs need exports to carry on.
I just wanted to comment on the milk donation program that MMPA has been involved in over the last several years. We have a very close working relationship with the Food Bank Council of Michigan. We started working with them in 2015 with an initial donation of milk throughout their system, and the relationship with them has really grown over the years. We expanded that effort in 2016 during the Flint water crisis, when it was determined that milk helps mitigate the impact of lead in the body. And so we had donated a number of truckloads of milk in partnership with Michigan Dairy Kroger during that time to help in that effort. And so since then, we've expanded and worked with the Food Bank Council in Michigan, working with their needs and what they needed on donated milk over the years. To the point for this year, we've really expanded that program and helped utilize the USDA dairy donation program to help offset some of the cost of that donation, to the point where we're donating about 400,000 gallons of milk so far calendar year to date for the Food Bank Council of Michigan. And then we also started the program in Ohio, since there was a need down there. With the train derailment down in that area, there was a need that the water was impacted in that area as well. And so we donated a couple truckloads of milk down in that area through Superior Dairy that we operate down in that area. So we're expanding now in Ohio. But I think it's an important component of our program. Our members are very supportive of this effort in the donation program, and we want to continue to expand that.
So 2023 is going to be a challenging year for dairy producers, primarily as we deal with the same inflation that everyone in this room sees, right? For dairy producers, it'll hit us on two sides, not only on the input side, it's also hitting our consumers at the grocery store, which both of those have an effect on us. We would definitely like to see interest in expanding the market for exports. A broader reach and more help in reaching out to other countries to open up other opportunities. And our industry, whether it is on the farm or at our processing plants, is definitely suffering from the labor challenges that have impacted a lot of the different areas. But we're definitely seeing that in our processing plants that do need to run 365. It's been a real challenge in this labor market. So.
Yeah, and as Doug said, those challenges are all the way from the farm side on the labor to the plant side. It's there's just a lot of challenges in keeping a strong labor force, throughout the supply chain in the dairy industry. The other areas, we do encourage continued investment in the roads and bridges with the aging infrastructure out there with the milk transported throughout. It's an important component to make this all work. The continued investment in expanding broadband throughout the state is a very important aspect of our members and our businesses to continue to operate, particularly in the rural area. It's a very important piece of all of that. And one thing that we've been very proud of over the years is really the strong partnership that the dairy industry has had between the government, legislature, and the university, and we really want to continue to see that moving forward. In addition, another important piece of all of this is the investment in animal agriculture research, particularly the Michigan Alliance for Animal Agriculture. That's been a very important component of what we see as far as investing in research for animal agriculture. MMPA has been supportive of these efforts over the years. We've invested over $300,000 to support some of these agriculture research programs that we're involved in. We're involved with MAAA as providing input on the priorities for the dairy industry on research programs, and that's been very beneficial for the industry, and we fully support investment in that program as well. And so those are a lot of different topics that we wanted to cover and share with you, and if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer those for you.
Thank you so much for that presentation, and most importantly, thank you for the Ohio donations. That is very generous of you, and I'm sure it's much appreciated. I do have a question, if you will. What are your key priorities going forward for this year and also next for the legislative session?
Some of those we outlined here, particularly on the labor end of things. That is a big challenge. Infrastructure, broadband, those are primarily in general buckets.
Yeah, I would put emphasis on the labor piece and what we can do to make labor more accessible.
Yes, we're hearing that across the board, and thank you for that. I'm now going to take questions. State Rep Reingans, please.
Woo. Thanks, Chair. My question was actually about the labor workforce. I have been hearing from a variety of industries about the labor shortages, and I'm trying to figure out what some of the causes might be that are a little bit more universal. And I hear a lot from parents who really want to work, but that they don't have childcare. Have you heard this from folks that are possibly leaving your industry or that might like to join your industry but really couldn't unless there's some sort of child care solutions? I mean, you said you have to work 365, so that of course, right off the bat, makes child care hard. But is there other things related to child care that you might have heard from some of your workers?
You know, on the processing side, we have definitely have had to decide how do we work with more flexible schedules, I guess, in the plants and like that to allow people to meet their family needs. It's, you know, that kind of reared its head through COVID. And so, yeah, I think that's an issue out there.
Yeah. And there's a wide range of job responsibilities out there in the dairy industry when you think about it, from farm, you know, to the processing, to the office, and, you know, so there's a wide range of things. And as Doug said, there is a lot more flexibility today than there ever has been in trying to work with, you know, employees and in meeting their needs to meet family obligations and all of that. But I think a lot of it depends on what role and what position they're in as to how that flexibility. But childcare in itself has not, to my knowledge, been the issue.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Next question from Representative Nyer.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to ask, you know, in general there, maybe highlight a couple of the things that you're doing through the sustainability that you might want to say that we've been, or that the agriculture industry has been doing for years. Just a couple of good examples there of how that has happened, or how the industry is making it happen.
So on the animal care front, we are in our 5th rendition of an animal care plan that all producers within our organization, and I believe in every organization in the state, work through and comply with. And we've seen that proactive plan on monitoring farms, on verifying the way cattle are handled, and not only that, but kind of giving the consumer the security they need to know that animals are well cared for. It has really lowered the challenges to animal care. I think through education of producers and on consumers. That's one plan that's really worked well on sustainability. On the other plan within our co-op, I think right now we have 5 active plans with customers, working with customers that want to see, it could be whether it's working in cover crops, whether it's working in energy utilization on the farm. We're looking for solutions to answers on at least 5 different plans within our co-ops to try to work towards the net zero initiative. And the success of those, you know, will be evaluated. These are studies, so the total success of that isn't evaluated at this time. But we do see a lot of interest from our customers as far as working for solutions. And I do know through National Milk, they also have their environmental ES program, which Michigan Milk cooperates in. And I think that's really an awareness program for producers. It helps get everybody educated and up to speed. And yeah, Sheila? Yeah.
Next, we're going to hear from Representative Fitzgerald.
Thank you. I'd like to first commend you on, your first slide there talked about the efficiency of our milk production, and I want to commend you on, adopting good practices and kind of being on the leading edge of this, because we know that in efficiency comes greater sustainability already. One thing that I wanted to just talk about is your relationship with the need for freshwater sources at both production and refining as well. And just talking about the need for that freshwater source and the protection of our water, because it helps produce good products at the end. But whether that be from crop production itself and feed production to the actual process of cleaning the milk and et cetera. But I'd just like to talk, have you talk a little bit about that relationship with good fresh water and how that impacts your operations.
You want to talk from the farm side, and I'll talk from the plant?
Okay. Well, from the farm side, obviously, clean water is, a cow drinks 50 gallons of water a day, right? And it needs to be clean. We also use a lot of water in washing and sanitation like that. So the needs of water on the farm are every day apparent to us. So I don't, for the importance, yes, it's very important. I do believe every farm I'm trying to understand if you're asking if we're keeping it clean. I do believe we are, There's safeguards in there to make sure everything is handled correctly to protect the water system, and nobody would have more interest in protecting it than the families that are living there, working there. So.
Madam Chair, if I may just interject for a moment. You bring up the question, kind of the root of the question here is clearly you depend upon good, clean water, again, at production and refining. How does that impact your decision about where and how you can implement potentially a new refining facility? Because you have the need for that infrastructure, you have the need for that good quality source. In my district, we do have a facility that does participate in the refining process of this, and I know that they chose that location because of high quality water. And so when talking about this, how do we decide where these plants may be? What efforts are you taking as an industry to also protect our water sources so that you can operate again more efficiently on the back end of this, or on the actual, after the milk has left the cow? How are we also trying to make sure that we are protecting our water sources for a good quality product for the people of Michigan?
I can say on the plant side, obviously the conservation of water is something that's taken very seriously, because there's a lot of efforts within the production plant that we can reuse that water and use it to clean the system, and goes so we can save that water resources. So we're looking at that type of not using it all up and using it efficiently. But I don't know what on the.
And the plants are definitely, the water treatments are all, from the plants, we would have water treatment systems and like that. And some of them take it to the process of drinkable water. Some of them go through a water treatment, municipality program and like that. On the farm side, all our producers are involved in environmental ES, which water care is a large segment of that tool that it's analyzed on the farm, and they cooperate in that.
Thank you. Next, Representative Kofia.
Good morning. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you, Madam Chair. So I wanted to circle back to what you named as one of your top policy priorities for the legislature this year in labor. And I'm reading sort of the piece of the slide where you say, you know, relying on fair trade rules and a level playing field to address that. So I was hoping you could, you know, dig in a little bit more. What policy could we potentially pass as the state legislature to support the issues around labor challenges that are impacting the supply chain? If it's not childcare, like scoping out what are some of the major barriers and what might we as a body do to support addressing that?
So
On the labor side?
on the farm side, I would say it's maybe more of a national issue. We would love to see H-2A made available to dairy farms, which would be year-round immigrant labor. Right now, the H-2A can only help with seasonal labor, and seasonal labor doesn't work for a dairy farm because we operate for more than just a
365.
3-month harvest window, right?
And H-2A is the visa, yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So on the state side, I don't know if they could help encourage that, but a change to that national law would benefit the producer side. On the processing side,
Yeah, I mean, it is a challenge. I don't know if there's an easy answer to your question on that, but I do know on the labor side, there's just a lot of different factors as to why we're not getting the same labor that we had prior to the pandemic. We just don't know what the actual answer is to all of that, but we have openings at all of our processing facilities, and at times we have all of them filled, and then other times we do need to take a closer look at it. But on the overall, on the farm side, definitely the H-2A is something that we really want to see expanded for the dairy industry to take a part of, because right now they can't, the way that it's written. But
Thank
that's
you.
on the federal.
Gotcha. And if I may, Madam Chair, follow up?
Quickly.
All right, quickly. So I just recently toured, this was cherries and apples up in the 103rd. I have a lot of that part of our agricultural sector in my district, but I toured a migrant housing unit that was just built with some state funds. I'm curious if the housing piece, again, I don't want to sort of put words in your mouth if that's not the issue, but when I'm trying to think about supporting our agricultural sector, addressing labor challenges, housing, transportation, just curious if that factors in, if housing is a piece of it at all.
if there was a program on housing, I believe our producers may take advantage of it. I can't say that they've told me that they would like housing dollars though. Today, I can't say that they've requested it like that today, so.
Thank you. Representative Stone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm following in the vein of the sustainability. Seems to be a hot topic. So I was reading about the incorporation of seaweed into animal feed to mitigate methane emissions. And I was curious how widely that practice has been adopted in the industry.
Well, it hasn't been adopted yet. It is still in, I would say, the study mode, and it is being researched. There are several products being researched as a feed additive to reduce the enteric methane emissions, right? And seaweed is definitely one that's in there. It looks promising. There is one product on the market today that is FDA approved that has claims to lower enteric emissions, and another one we expect to be approved this year, by the end of the year maybe, that shows a lot of evidence to make a substantial decrease in the enteric emissions of methane from a cow.
Quick follow-up. Does that increase the cost of feed significantly?
So the product that will be approved we haven't seen a price on it, so I can't answer that. But there is no production value to it. So as a producer, you got to decide how do you justify paying for the product, right? If there's no increased animal health or production benefit.
But there's just a lot of long-term studies that have to be done on seaweed and other types of feed additives that really need to make sure that the quality and the long-term impact of it is something that would be worthwhile. But the product is, like Doug said, is just being researched.
Representative Pice.
Thank you. I've got a number of questions. I'll try to be quick. I'm sorry, did I mishear? Oh, okay. One I think is a general question. People always want to, what happens to the cow when its milking years are finished? I've always wondered about that. Two, you mentioned that milk helps mitigate lead in the body, and I'm wondering how it does that. I'm wondering also if you could explain very quickly about how you plan to get to carbon neutral in 2050. And then I wanted to ask something about exports real quick when that's finished. Thank you.
Well, a dairy cow has two careers. Her first career is to produce milk, and her second career is as a piece in the meat food chain. Let's see. To get to carbon neutral, I'll be honest that all the answers aren't there yet, but there's several products, several avenues in the works, everything from methane digesters to cover crops and energy savings within the farm. The one thing that ag does that is unique to a lot of other industries, other than forestry, ag and industry have, we're the only two industries that really have the ability to sequester carbon. So we can actually pull things negative. And so that's how all that's going to play as this science goes forward. I don't have all the answers, but I will say that the ability for us to put carbon in the ground through sequestration is a unique ability that we have, and that'll probably be a big part of how we get to net zero. And I don't know if I got all the questions answered. That's only two.
The mitigating lead in the body?
Yeah, and so milk, as you may know, has a very dense nutrient, essential nutrients in the milk, and it has been found through research that those essential nutrients are the ones that do help mitigate that. And there's some medical information that we had used at the time of the donation that pointed that out to us, and studies through MSU that we had helped partner with on that information. They had helped bring that to our attention, actually. So.
And thank you, Madam Chair. One more real quick. I remember some years back there was an issue, and I'm sorry, I don't know exactly what Michigan played in it, but it was also with Canada, and there had been some dumping of milk, I believe. I think it had to do with costs or storage. I'm wondering if you could explain that real quick and Michigan's part in that.
I'm guessing that was by,
It was maybe the past 5 years.
I think at that time Canada operated what they called Class 7, and they dumped subsidized milk on the market and brought prices down. That I think maybe is the issue you're talking about. The USMCA put another agreement in place that had a good benefit for dairy. Has not been realized at this time, and we are actually in our second round of resolution of some challenges to the tariffs that Canada may not be following the tariffs that they agreed to in the USMCA, but that's a snapshot. I think that's where you were at.
I think so. Thank you.
Moving on, we're going to hear from State Representative Vanderwall.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you guys very much for being here and kind of giving us a little in-depth history on the milk producers. Real quick question: when we look at northern Michigan in production facilities, I would say that one of I'm only guessing that part of our threats to the dairy industry is good roads, that we need to get to those facilities, and making sure that we actually have production facilities within a radius. Can you give us just a quick synopsis of where we're sitting with production in northern Michigan and what percentage of milk is produced from I-96 basically to the north?
What percentage of milk, of all the milk? I don't have those facts in front of us, to be
Yeah.
honest. The bulk of the milk production within Michigan is really coming from central Michigan, Thumb area, and the west side of the state are the three major pockets of milk production. But as far as the percentage north, I don't have that off the top of my head. So.
Yeah.
And then just to follow up where it comes to the our facilities for production, how are we sitting? Are we still struggling and much of the milk has to be moved to the southern part of the state, or are we adequately supplied with production facilities?
I think as far as the state in whole, I think we feel that with the new plant there in St. John's, that the state's fairly balanced. As far as facilities north or south, I'm not sure how to answer that for sure. I mean, Michigan Milk, we have a good customer in Remus, which is real close to God's country, because that's where I'm from. But, and then we also deliver into one facility in the UP, but most of the facilities would be Remus and south.
All right, very good. Thank you.
State Representative Young.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, too, for being here. A quick question for you. I'm looking at your donations. So it appears that 2016 donated about 60,000 gallons, and that was the highest amount that you'd ever donated up until 2023 when we're like in excess of 400,000.
Yep.
So I'm trying to understand, does this have something to do with need versus overproduction? Is this just Christmas once this year, and then we're gonna go back to these lower levels? Because if it's a need, then I'll need to know how you're gonna sustain this based on your previous numbers. You never hit anything like that before.
Yeah, right. Yep, very good question. So like I said earlier, that we have a very close relationship with Food Bank Council of Michigan, and we rely on them to let us know what their needs are. They do have other funding sources that they use, throughout the year, variety of different ways. So it's more of a relationship. When you need milk, let us know. This is how much we can donate this year, and so we've worked it like that. During the pandemic, there were additional federal funds that they had received to help support some of those donations. So there wasn't as much of a need during those last few years. As that funding drops off, we found that there's more of a need to donate, and that's why we picked that up this year. We're also able to utilize a new program in the 2018 Farm Bill, the USDA Dairy Donation Program, that was not there prior to then. And so we've been using that to help offset a portion of that cost of donating the milk, because any donation that we make, really impacts our dairy farmer members that are making that donation, because it is a cost that we have to absorb. And so through that program, we're able to help cover some of that cost of donating it, and that's why it's been picking up a lot more this year.
But it sounds to me like this number is driven by the Food Bank Council.
Yes.
Is what you're saying.
Absolutely,
And
yeah.
not by any work that you guys do. If you have the ability to donate it, you will. If you don't, you won't.
Yeah.
But they tell you what is needed.
Yes, yep.
Got
We
it.
tell them what we can do it. Like I said, it goes back and forth, and it is purely a donation and not on excess milk only. And we make sure that they have the needs that they need.
And our last question today is from State Representative Diefendorf.
I know we have another presentation, but obviously we're intrigued, so we really appreciate your work. I was wondering if you could just briefly expand on how the disparate access to broadband affects your production and your ability to participate in the marketplace.
Well, I would say that we probably experienced it more over the pandemic. A lot of our in-person meetings were, turned virtual overnight, and that is when we completely saw that with our members trying to connect and get information that will impact their decisions on the farm. They just need that steady, reliable internet service to be able to do that, and we found that initially that was a huge obstacle to come over to get information out to our members, and particularly in the rural areas. That was something that we noticed, firsthand.
And as a producer, it's hard to believe that how we need to be connected to operate every day. We need a good, reliable Wi-Fi just to maintain quality milk. I mean, we use notification systems that operate off Wi-Fi, so no matter where we are on the farm. We know the temperature of our milk. We know the speed it's going in our tanks and like that. And that takes you can't do it on dial-up. It takes a very good system to do that. And the technology is such, and we're chasing thin margins, even in the field, we need access to that data all the time to run a corn planter across the field. So I know when we had the chance to get fiber in, it was just like, it made our life a lot easier. We went to fiber 2 years ago, and all of a sudden, all the technology that we invested in, we were getting our value out of it, because it was like, really, I paid for this, and this is all it'll do, but we were struggling, you know. And so just in today's world, if you're going to be competitive in the ag world, you need that strong connection.
Thank you so much. You were very gracious with all of our questions. We really appreciate
we
that.
appreciate them, and we invite you to come to one of our processing plants or one of our member farms at any time if you would like. So.
Great, maybe this summer.
Prefer when the sun's shining.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And summer.
Thank you.
Next, we will have a presentation from the Michigan Association of Conservation Districts. Would Dan Molinen step forward? Thank you for coming today, and thank you for presenting. And members, hold your questions to the end. Thank you so much.
Good morning, Madam Chair and representatives. I'm Jerry Miller. I'm a board member and chair of the Kent Conservation District, and I'm also in my second term as president of the State Association of Michigan Conservation Districts. So we have a presentation, and before I introduce my colleague, I would just remind you that within your district, depending on the geographic area, each of you have one or more conservation districts. And second, given the questions previously and Representative Fitzgerald's question about fresh water, I would just say that each of our districts have a mission, but sort of a common mission across all of those districts is that their mission is to protect and enhance the soil, water, and natural resources within their district. I'm pleased to introduce our Executive Director, Dan Molinen, and Dan will start with our presentation.
Great, thank you, Jerry, and good morning, everyone. As Jerry said, my name is Dan Molinen. I'm the Executive Director of MACD, but also serve locally on my district Board of Directors in Genesee County, where I am chair. So a bit about our association. Our mission is to strengthen conservation districts through leadership, information, and representation at the state level. And we do this by outreach and advocacy, educational programming, and business services to help districts thrive. And as Jerry mentioned too, really the core of what we do is about healthy soils, healthy water, which means we have healthy food, and healthy people, and a healthy Michigan. And the connections between all of those things are super critical to the work that we collectively do. So what are conservation districts? There are 75 districts that exist around the state, and much like police, firefighters, other services, we're the local natural resource management services. So we're folks' neighbors. We help fellow Michiganders conserve their lands, waterways, and ultimately so our environment can be cleaner, healthier, and an economically stronger place to live and work and grow for our community. In the 1930s, most of you know, probably familiar, or at least have some understanding of the Dust Bowl. Oftentimes you get the images from John Steinbeck and from Grapes of Wrath and understand the real implications that this had for America. And because farmers engaged in really heavy tillage with a lack of rotation in crops and a lack of cover cropping, as well as a lack of wind barriers, combined with a severe drought, the level of soil erosion was catastrophic. Some of these images you can see that farms were completely buried in sand. I mean, this cost about $20 billion in today's standard, accounting for inflation. And the impact that this had, it destroyed farmers' lives. So there was an emergency response from the federal government, and they created what would later become the Natural Resource Conservation Service. But when they realized was that they had difficulty delivering conservation programs on the ground because farmers and landowners tend to be a little skeptical of the federal government coming on their property and giving them advice and telling them what to do with their land. So they realized very quickly that they needed local people on the ground to help implement this programming and get farmers and landowners enrolled in their conservation programming. So there was a call at the federal level from the FDR administration to have states create their own conservation district law, which would then establish conservation districts. So our guiding philosophy is that decisions on conservation issues should be made at the local level in terms of what priorities of how we can spend resources to address local concerns. Everything that we do is voluntary and non-regulatory, and so this really builds a strong foundation of trust between conservation district staff and farmers, landowners, and producers. Again, without that relationship of trust, it really makes delivering conservation on private land very, very difficult. So to this end, conservation districts work closely with our local, state, and federal government organizations and agencies to roll out programs that directly assist and impact the environmental quality of local communities in our beautiful peninsulas. So I always have this figure, and I draw this figure, talk about this figure a lot, is that 72% of all land in Michigan is privately owned. And so without conservation districts being involved with conservation policy, trying to reach some of our overall climate goals in Michigan when we look at the My Healthy Climate Plan would be incredibly difficult if we don't have conservation programs happening on private land. So I do have a video here, and I know when we testified before, it didn't work, so it looks like it's not going to work again today, unfortunately. But I'd be happy to forward those on to anyone. We have some good introductions as to what we do, which on our YouTube channel you can check out later. So some of our core and historic partners we just wanted to highlight, folks that we work very regularly with, would be, of course, USDA, the Natural Resource Conservation Service. They are our primary partner at the federal level. We also work very closely with MDARD, as well as the Conservation District Employees of Michigan Association. They sort of represent the staff side of things. We work very closely with MSU Extension and the Institute of Water Research. In addition, we work very closely with USDA Farm Service Agency. We work very closely with DNR on a number of DNR programs that we implement on the ground. We work very closely with EGLE, especially in the administration of 319 grants, recycling programs, tire recycling programs, household hazardous waste collection, and a number of other essential services through EGLE's programming. And we also work very closely with county and municipal governments. Many of our districts work with their local drain commissioners on improving water quality, helping to ensure that we are reducing nutrient runoff into our water systems. And then, of course, we partner with non-government organizations as well in the nonprofit sector. So this does have some older programs in here, but it's a good demonstration of showing how sort of the funding system works in our sort of ecosystem. So you can see, through DNR, through EGLE, through MDARD, a number of those partners that I've mentioned. That comes in the form of often of grant programming. And then 2 years ago, we were able to secure some operational funding through the state legislature for $3 million, which accounts for $40,000 per district. For the last 2 fiscal years, we've had that support. And all of that then goes to the districts, which then implement a whole litany of programs for the state. Some of the most significant would be the Michigan Agriculture Environmental Assurance Program, MEAP, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with. We are the staff who implement the MEAP program for the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development. And without conservation district partners at that level, the success of the MEAP program would be severely diminished. So I also have some images here of just to kind of want to show you some visuals of what our work actually looks like. So I'll just kind of quickly go through some of these. You can see some photos and some projects from some of our districts throughout the state. So here we've got some images from Washtenaw County Conservation District. They're one of our stronger districts in the state. On the left there, you've got some photos of some farmers who are learning how to use a no-till drill, which is critical for implementing a no-till operation. Oftentimes, farmers if they're going to invest in a new practice and in a new conservation practice on their land, they typically like to see demonstrations or get to learn more about it before they go and buy the equipment. So we're able to kind of give them some trials and some demonstrations and help kind of, wet their beak, so to speak, in terms of getting involved with new things that could save them some money in the long run. In addition, there's another image here on the right where they held a pruning workshop for some orchards so folks could learn how to properly prune trees to maximize yield as well as to improve the health of trees. In addition, a lot of our districts do community education. In Washtenaw, here's a walk that they did that was about medicinal plants. So they were able to show some folks from the community some value of some native medicinal plants. And then, of course, here's an image of a farmer who proudly displayed his meat verified status once he achieved that. It's usually a pretty big celebratory moment for a lot of farmers when they finally get meat verified, because it does usually take a good amount of time, and it's something that they can really show off that they've done their part to help protect their local environment on their land. In addition, Washtenaw is a critical partner in the Michigan FarmLink program. FarmLink is a relatively new program. Originally was out of Ottawa County. They've expanded it now to Washtenaw, to where they're connecting farmers who are nearing the age of retirement and looking to sell their land and move out. They're helping to connect that farmland to younger farmers coming into the profession. And access to land is one of the biggest issues and barriers for new farmers. And so this is one of the ways that conservation districts are actually helping to address this issue, and we're hoping to see more expansion of this throughout the state in the future. Here's some images from Muskegon Conservation District, another good example of some technical assistance they provided. So on the image on the left is from an inland lake. You can see there was some pretty serious shoreline erosion there. And they were able to come in and provide that technical assistance and plan to design a whole shoreline stabilization project there on the right that you can see, which they put some native plants in as well as some rocks and things to design what would ultimately be a little bit more of a natural seawall kind of setting. Here's another example from Muskegon Conservation District where they helped design and plant a stream bank stabilization project in the Muskegon River. Here's an example from Oceana Conservation District. On the left, another it was folks who grow chestnuts out in Oceana County. And then on the right, they did a tire collection event I believe through a program funded through Eagle, where they collected over 2,000 used tires, which again helps prevent these from getting dumped in vacant spaces in urban settings or going into landfills, and also helps reclaim these materials so they can be used for other purposes. Here's a picture from Manistee. They did a tree planting project. This property was formerly a blue spruce plantation, and they actually replaced all of it with 4,000 native hardwoods. And so, they helped put together the forest management plans with assistance from NRCS, who then basically provide the funds to plant the trees. So this is a really good example of the success of both the local and federal partnership between districts and NRCS. And then lastly, I've got some images from Genesee Conservation District. I'd be remiss if I didn't share at least some things from my own district. We're basically one of the leaders in the Michigan High Tunnel Initiative, and we were able to bring over $150,000 worth of cost share dollars to local producers in Genesee County, where we were able to put up over 160 high tunnels and hoop houses throughout the city of Flint, as well as other spaces throughout the county. In addition, part of that was also providing technical assistance to growers who were using these spaces so they could really get the biggest bang for their buck to help increase their yields on a smaller acreage operation. So recently, the fiscal year 22 MDARD legislative report came out for the Conservation District's operations grant. And some of the key takeaways that we want to share is that for every $1 that was invested by the state of Michigan into Conservation District operations, $4 were leveraged from other sources. So considering it was a relatively small investment from the state in the form of $3 million, to see a 1 to 4 return on that is significant and something that we're really celebrating and showing that with just a little bit of increase in district capacity, we're really able to get more creative and bring dollars in from other sources. And the grant also requires districts conduct a biannual audit and submit a board-approved budget. And so 50 of our districts submitted a completed fiscal year 2021 audit, and 24 districts submitted a complete fiscal year audit in 2020. And then 74 districts submitted an annual budget. Districts were also required to complete an assessment of their communities to determine local natural resource concerns. And the results really ultimately are what guide districts in identifying those priority issues to address them through voluntary conservation programs. So the results from the conservation needs assessment were submitted in the fiscal year with over 11,700 individuals throughout the state participating. And the top 6 priorities they identified were water quality improvement, forest management, invasive species management, agricultural management, wildlife management, and riparian habitat improvement. So part of the outreach that we tracked was that, core function of what districts do is really provide citizens access to natural resource management assistance, education, and referrals to both public and private sector professionals who work in this area. And in fiscal year 22, districts held 1,177 outreach events with 69,270 people participating. And I think that's pretty substantial and a good kind of snapshot of what 75 unique organizations can do throughout the state. Additionally, district directors and staff attended 1,025 county, township, and other municipality meetings for collaboration, education on priority concerns, and conservation programs available to address them. So what's on our horizon? It's a pretty exciting time in the conservation world from the federal level. Congress last August invested a record-breaking amount of money into our flagship conservation programs, with $20 billion that are supporting EQIP, CSP, and a number of other flagship programs that we work with NRCS on. And even just on Monday, Jerry actually shared an article with me from Politico Morning Ag that the Undersecretary for Farm Production and Conservation, Robert Bonney, was quoted as saying that they are understanding full well the implications of this amount of money and the challenges that come with spending that amount of money, and that they are very much relying on their conservation district partners to help get these dollars spent directly to farmers and landowners and to make sure that we can get them that financial assistance. So, it's one of our challenges too, is trying to ramp up capacity as much as possible in the system to help make it more effective so we can better deliver on this congressional appropriation. In addition, so we're also working to push to get more conservation district staff to become conservation planners and to really streamline the Farm Bill application process for our farm producers. The Farm Bill programs are, while effective, they can be a little bit cumbersome in terms of the application process, a little bit bureaucratic. And so just having a knowledgeable local staff person at a district who can help someone work through that process and help them learn, how to do it can go a long way with making sure that we get more of these contracts secured in our local communities. In addition, the Michigan Association of Conservation Districts was recently awarded a $4.7 million grant from USDA as part of their Climate Smart Agriculture program to implement a pilot project that we're calling the Michigan Climate Smart Farm Project. And it's going to occur in the 4 southeast counties, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later in the presentation. MACD also is funded by the Herb Family Foundation for our Farmers Taking Action in the Western Lake Erie Basin project, which I'll also touch on a little bit later in the presentation. We're also working on expanding our urban agriculture and conservation programming throughout the state. Annually, we have a statewide reforestation program that a lot of our districts are actually wrapping up this week and next week, to where we sell trees to farmers and landowners. And to the tune, we've calculated estimates that we're planting anywhere from 1 to 2 million trees on private land on an annual basis. This is something that we're hoping to better capture with our updates to some of the reporting on the operations grant through MDARD too. So hopefully next year we'll have a little bit of a better figure as to what total amount of trees we're planting on an annual basis. And then we're also working with the Michigan Diversity, Equity, and Inclusivity and Conservation Project, which is another partnership that we're engaged with our federal partners at NRCS, to where we're working on doing a better job of delivering conservation programming to underserved populations. This includes Michigan's tribes, veterans, women, beginning farmers, as well as our urban producers. And then we're also working on expanding overall representation of underrepresented folks on our local conservation district boards. So we're engaged in a number of training programs and sessions that we're hoping to host here to help get our districts, give them more tools in their toolbox to help make sure that they're bringing everyone to the table in a fair manner. So one thing I just want to share in this presentation is just kind of a picture of how other states in our region fund their conservation district system. As you can see, these are other states in the North Central region as part of our national association. And Michigan ranks fairly low, and it was up until 2 fiscal years ago to where we actually had zero funding from the state, other than a little bit of administrative support from the grants and programs that we implement. So the green bar is a total representation of Farm Bill dollars that are going into states that have more robustly funded conservation district systems. So you can see in states like Missouri, Wisconsin, Minnesota, where they invest anywhere from 12 to 14 or 15 million in their districts, that the amount of dollars that they're securing through the federal government that are going into local communities is substantially higher. So with all of this money coming in for the IRA, it's really imperative that we do our best to try to ramp up capacity in this system so we can better deliver these dollars to our communities throughout the state. So this is a bit outdated, but we were asking for a supplementary request for the fiscal year 23. We realize it's a little bit late now at this point, but we're asking the legislature to increase funding to $14 million for the MDART operations grant. This would help bring funding up to $189,000 per district per year, and with that, our goal is to help hopefully address some issues that are pretty critical to stabilizing our overall operations for districts. The $3 million was great because it helped keep our doors open so we could continue to offer our services. But really, we need to shift our districts from being just program managers to being conservation planners and community leaders and conveners who can really help bring everyone to the table at the local level to drive and address natural resource concerns in their communities. So with this funding, we hope to have each district hire a full-time outreach staff person who can connect with rural, urban farmers, producers, landowners, forest owners, et cetera, those who aren't already enrolled in Farm Bill programming, MEEP, or other conservation programming. We hope that districts also will hire conservation planners to help draft conservation plans. The very first step a producer has to go through when they're applying for EQIP or CSP, the federal Farm Bill programs, is that they have to put together a conservation plan with the help of district staff or with the local soil conservationists at NRCS. And if we can, NRCS could hire 200 people today, but there would still be some major issues with getting those folks on board and ready, and then they still wouldn't have those local connections in the community to help deliver those programs. So we're hoping that this will also help address the lack of capacity to deliver programming to underserved communities. Both Wayne Conservation District and Macomb Conservation District are very limited in capacity, and these are two of our most populated counties in Michigan. So for us, we see that as a disservice to those constituencies who don't have an active district that can really help address their local natural resource concerns. So both Genesee and Kent Conservation District, as strong urban districts, have been dedicated to helping lead as examples to help get them established and thriving as urban conservation districts. And then we're also hoping to expand just employee benefits. We have a really difficult time retaining district staff. A lot of folks in the natural resource sort of profession view conservation districts as sort of an entry-level position because of the fact that districts can't offer health insurance or retirement, because typically with just the grant programs, there just simply isn't enough in the administrative support to cover those. So we're hoping that with additional funding through the state that we can expand those benefits to really help keep people around longer, because ultimately, at the end of the day, it undermines the efficacy of our ability to deliver conservation. If a farmer is dealing with a new person every few years, it really turns them off from wanting to engage in that program, which only makes it that much more difficult for us to implement conservation programming that's going to help improve our water quality and soil health. And then lastly, having some additional funding will help us leverage additional funding sources from things like the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative or regional conservation planning partnerships or private foundations, all of which often require a match or at least a certain amount of administrative support that can help administer those grant dollars. And right now with status quo, a lot of districts really simply can't chase GLRI dollars or RCPPs because they just don't have the administrative capacity to do so. So I include in this slide a couple images to really draw some connections between the power of conservation planning and the efficacy of delivering Farm Bill programs. So you can see on the left is an image of our CTI program, to where all the counties who had a CTI, which stands for Conservation Technical Assistance Initiative, and what it paid for was basically engineers and planners throughout the entire state who could put together the conservation plans in order to pursue federal cost share programs through EQIP and CSP. And so then on the right, you see the total obligations in dollars in all the counties. And the ones that are most concentrated, who secured the most dollars, were folks who had CTI grants. So there's a direct connection in having someone at the district level as a planner on staff who can help those farmers get through that plan to get those applications deployed. I had another video about our work at the Western Lake Erie Basin, but I don't think it's going to work. As part of our project I mentioned earlier, our association is working with the Herb Family Foundation to basically, the whole principle of it is it's farmers connecting other farmers to conservation practices. So we do a lot of outreach events to have farmers educate some of their peers and colleagues on some of their practices that they've implemented on their land to help improve water quality and reduce nutrient loss of phosphorus and nitrates into our waterways, which, as many of you likely know, run off into the lake, which then causes eutrophication and these algal blooms to grow, which also are problematic because they have microcystins, which are neurotoxins in them. And they also starve the lake of all oxygen. And so then all the other their biology and wildlife and in that ecosystem are essentially starved. And so it creates dead matter that then creates further issues. So the state has an adaptive management plan with targeted phosphorus reduction goals. So our work is really critical to helping to get farmers down there not only educated on this issue, but also to help them implement practices that will help them reduce their need for fertilizer and help create some buffers and other things between field and stream to help ensure we improve water quality. And as I mentioned, the Michigan Climate Smart Farm Project. So this is going to be taking place in the 4 southeast counties. Washtenaw County Conservation District will be the lead on it. But it's going to be focused on supporting small scale and underserved producers to help them implement practices like cover cropping, residue and tillage management, pasture and silvopasture establishment, which I just want to kind of put a pin in real quick because someone asked the question about what dairy producers are doing to reduce carbon emissions. This is something that dairy producers could very easily implement into their pastures. The idea of incorporating trees into their systems can help act as carbon sinks, but also improve the overall soil and grazing grasses and whatnot that they're planting. So in terms of how we can think about those systems, we need technical assistance to those producers in order to help them implement those systems on their land. And so that's where we come in to really help deliver that kind of programming. In addition, again, things like feed management, forest stand improvement, wetland restoration, and combustion system improvements. And so what we're doing is we're creating a pilot project that is going to be a climate verification system that's basically adjacent to the MEAT program. So a farmer can get environmentally verified and then also be carbon climate verified, and then they can market their products as such, as being climate smart products. So it's a 5-year grant, and we're excited because we're going to be providing some additional cost share dollars to producers so they can help implement these practices. So I've already kind of touched on that. So with that, we're happy to take any questions that anyone might have for us.
State Representative Fitzgerald.
Thank you so much. My only question, and Jerry, thank you so much for your leadership in the Kent region as well, and for your presentation today. But my one question was about the cooperation of these various districts, understanding that the issues that you're addressing don't necessarily stop at the water's edge, if you will. And understanding how if we have 83 counties and 75 districts, how does that collaboration work so that we can distribute the information faster and more efficiently across the state so that we can be better conservators of the state?
Sure. So that's a great question, Representative. MACD is separated into 10 regions as part of our governance structure. And so we not only have annual regional meetings in those regions to where counties can all collaboratively work together on these issues. But as an association, we've worked really hard to streamline our communication system. So we actually have a statewide Slack workspace to where all of our districts can connect and communicate with each other to collaborate on projects. And we hold an annual summer conference as well as a fall convention to where we really usually get really good participation from our districts to help bring them together. But it's an area to where I think especially the Regional Conservation Planning Partnership, the RCPP program through NRCS, to where if we had additional district capacity to pursue some of these grant dollars, thinking about watersheds span, they're not limited to county lines. So, trying to potentially collaborate on those projects and bring all of the districts to the table is something that certainly, we encourage and try to foster as much as possible. But at the end of the day, we have capacity issues, and that's our largest challenge that prevents some districts from further collaborative efforts.
And Representative Fitzgerald, you really hit a great point. So before we had operational funds that Dan mentioned, if you think about it, 75 districts, they were discrete entities, and they were competing for grants, and they were competing against each other. So the fact that the state has now invested with operational funds, it has provided an opportunity for more collaboration, and we as the state association are continuing to help facilitate that. But without those state operational funds, 75 discrete entities, and that's what we had, and it's difficult, but that is now changing where they see opportunities to collaborate, and we can give you a lot of examples where that is occurring. But thanks for that question, a good question.
State Representative Vanderwall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, thank you for being here. Real quick, we didn't touch a lot on invasive species, and I know that you guys have been heavily involved. But a little bit further, are we working, and I'm going to pick on probably one with our road commissions and a lot of work that they do on trimming the roads and roadways. Do we do any collaboration with other organizations for identifying invasive species and making sure that it's reported to the proper people for eradication?
Yes, and again, as I commented previously, you'll see differences across the 75 districts. But locally in Kent Conservation District, we have a working relationship with our road commissioners. We have working relationships and some funding from a few of our townships to do exactly what you're addressing or asking about. How are we working together in identifying invasive species? And as you may know, the Department of Natural Resources has what they call CISMA, Comprehensive Invasive Species Grants, and they are, and with that funding, they have now, as I most recently read, have funded a lead district in different regions across the state, but they now have coverage for all 83 counties through their CISMA grants. Comprehensive Invasive Species Management, I think, is the acronym. So in our case in western Michigan, Ottawa is the lead, and there's Kent and 5 other districts in addition to Ottawa and Kent are involved in that. And so again, back to the previous question, there's a great example where districts are working together and sharing resources and sharing expertise and sharing information to address invasive species. And in our own district, we have a very active, what we call a strike team, and it's a major part of our program.
Thank you.
Representative Reingans.
Thanks, Chair. My question was about your legislative asks. I see on the slides that you have our current legislative ask. Most of them are appropriations, and we are a policy committee. So I'm curious if there's any policy specific asks that you had for us as a policy committee.
There are certainly some things that we've been working on. We don't have any particular policy priorities today to identify. But we would say that there's always a need for additional funding. That seems to be our main focus in a number of the programs that we implement. I didn't mention the Forestry Assistance Program. A number of districts have FAP foresters throughout the state too, and but that's not coverage that's done throughout the entire state. So there certainly is more need throughout the state for some of these other things. But Jerry, I don't know if you possibly had some policy priorities as well.
Many of our policies relate nationally, so across the nation there are 3,000 districts. So what our policies really address, in addition to our policy or our ask here for funding in Michigan, we have a whole series of policies that we work with our national association. Dan was just in a couple weeks ago. We had a congressional visit. Dan was in. He visited with Senator Stabenow on some of those policies, as well as other individuals. So what we're really looking for in those policies are funding and stabilization of our primary partner, USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service. But one of the policies that we can mention, out of our regional effort, we meet the 8 states in the North Central, we meet regionally, and when we met face-to-face back in January, we developed a policy to add another subtitle to Title II of the Farm Bill. So subtitles, there's like 5 or 6, I think, or 7 subtitles: Environmental Quality Incentive Program, Conservation Stewardship Program, and so on and so forth. And we sent forward a resolution from the 8 states to add additional subtitle in the conservation title of the Farm Bill to address urban agriculture. And our community, Senator Stabenow liked the term community agriculture, so we'll probably, when Dan visited with the senator, but having that, we're saying we need additional policy in the Farm Bill to address urban agriculture. And so we'll see how that goes, but when we took it to the National Association meeting then in February, it was almost unanimously approved to go forward. So that would be an example of a policy that we're working on nationally.
I will say, while Jerry was commenting, I thought of 2 items that came to mind. There's one area to where our districts in more rural communities, like the UP, we have one district that is comprised of 3 counties in geographic area: Chippewa, Luce, Mackinac. And so it's a challenge for their directors, who of course are locally elected officials, to go to their meetings physically sometimes. So it came up, especially during COVID and the pandemic. I know the Open Meetings Act was a pretty hot button issue in the legislature, but to where, since we're a little bit different than municipal boards and maybe even county boards, to where some of our geographic areas can be a little bit larger, if there was some flexibility with the Open Meetings Act to allow some of those members and directors of those boards to meet virtually, whether they have voting rights if they're attending virtually or not, or at least can be part of the discussion, that would be important to help them better conduct their business, because they really learned that in the virtual setting they could actually make it more accessible for folks who have really some serious transportation barriers to even attend their meetings in person. So that was one area that we identified, and another area was which is a much larger and more complicated issue, but the Michigan Spark grants through the Natural Resource Trust Fund basically identify that the dollars can be used for recreational purposes, and only entities that are local government or special government districts whose purpose exists for recreation, like maybe local authorities. And so we've had some districts try to apply for some of those grants and have been told by DNR that they're ineligible, where those grants specifically have been meant for expansion of nature centers and other recreational uses in their communities that really do provide a substantial service for their constituencies. Mm-hmm.
Representative Diefendorf.
Thank you. So I've been doing some research into the MEAP program, and I'm thrilled with the interest that farmers have in that program. And also, I am really looking forward to the potential that it still has. I don't know that we can assume that everybody does know about the MEAP program. So if you could just describe briefly what it does, but also include the incentives and exemptions that are offered in order to interest farmers in the program. And as a follow-up to that, I would love to know how often the MEAP curriculum is updated to incorporate best practices in regenerative farming.
Great question. So MEAP is essentially a verification system. So it's a way that farmers can really confirm that they're engaged in best practices in terms of reducing their impact on their local environment. And so this involves connecting with a MEAP technician who then comes onto their property and helps survey some of the issues. And legally, they cannot report anything that could be a point of concern. So if a farmer has something that could potentially be problematic, they can't go and report it to EGLE or other regulatory agencies to respond to it. So it is built on that foundation of trust, which I think is really what makes it an effective program. And then that MEAP technician will help them identify things that they can improve in their cropping systems, things they can improve in their livestock operations. If they could maybe implement a buffer strip on the edge of their field before drainage ditches with a pollinator strip, or things that can improve local pollinator habitats and reduce runoff of phosphorus and nitrogen. They can help them with identifying soil testing needs to where they can maybe even engage in precision application of fertilizers and other things, storage of chemicals and fertilizers. So they can help develop, stronger storage plans and pouring plans and things when they're filling. It's really a whole variety of practices, and we sit on the advisory committee for MEAP as an association, and so that's pretty well represented from folks from all over the agriculture industry, both in the private and nonprofit sector. And I would say in terms of standards, things are pretty regularly updated, and then we often, a lot of our programming, have training sessions for our MEAP technicians to where we're giving them cutting edge presentations from academics and from researchers who are really gathering the data that really help bridge that gap between, that often can exist between academia and sort of implementation of policy. So, and then you mentioned incentives and exemptions. So typically, and this is a challenge for us sometimes in terms of navigating between the federal government and state government in terms of federal law and state law, is that MEAP is a state program. So they're not necessarily out there using federal dollars to implement federal programs, but they can help bridge that gap and get farmers through the door to their local NRCS, USDA field office. And that's really where I think is the benefit of this partnership that we have with our federal and state and local partners, is that we help get them through the door so then they can learn more about EQIP or CSP and other cost share opportunities. If I were being frank, MEAP as itself should have more cost share funding supported to it. If Michigan had its own cost share program that was in addition to federal programs, that would go a long way, I think, in helping to further improve the efficacy of MEAP as a program.
Yeah, and just to summarize what Dan said, so there are 4 components to MEAP verification: cropping systems, livestock systems, farmstead systems, which would be to chemical storage, water, well water, and so forth. And then one other one is forestry and wildlife. So those are the 4 components. A producer can be verified in one or multiple practices under MEAP. So I don't know if I give you a little more detail. I think that was part of your question.
We're going to wrap up here with one more question from Representative Nyer.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your time here today. I guess it's a combination commentary and question there. It's sort of a unique situation where this is highly encouraging voluntary participation, not mandating, not forcing farmers into it. So that way, it gives a person, or whether you're talking farming or a community project, there, it gives those people the opportunity to implement the project that they'd like to accomplish in their own timetable, and that way it's a more sustainable system. I guess I'd like to have you guys comment on the need to maintain that voluntary type system and the ability for each district to be able to run their own program.
Yeah, and I think you did a nice summary, Representative. It's volunteer. It's a volunteer program, and all of our programs from the district are volunteer. We have no mandatory programs, and we provide the confidentiality for producers. We follow USDA practices in terms of identifying producers and so forth that are involved with the privacy that's required for in USDA programs. So yes, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but it's a volunteer program, and all of our, as I being redundant, but all of our programs are volunteer, and we try to make sure that the producer understands that. And it's back to our initial conversation or initial presentation when the conservation district, when USDA established then the Soil Conservation Service, now the Natural Resources Conservation Service, our president, President Roosevelt at that time, and his advisors said, well, wait a minute, we cannot have a bunch of federal technicians out there on the land that producers do not know. And so the president and his advisors developed a model legislation and sent it to all the governors in 1936. And by 1937, Michigan's governor and many of the other governors across the country had signed that model legislation, which allowed for the election locally of 5 individuals to establish a conservation district. So we have that. That's the genesis of that federal-local partnership, and obviously local people we know our neighbors, and our neighbors hopefully know us, and obviously so it provides that level of trust for producers to work with their conservation district.
I'd also add that the efficacy of voluntary programming really comes also down to efficacy and use of state and federal resources and dollars. Regulatory responses cost substantially more when it comes to enforcement. And most farmers are good stewards of their land. I mean, their money, their value, their whole livelihood comes from that land. And so, farmers are the original conservationists. And to have farmers engaged in conservation programming to help preserve and make sure that their land's going to be available for their kids, for their grandkids, and for future generations is really critical. And when it's the carrot and a stick versus the whip saying, right? And we're definitely the carrot and the stick people in terms of trying to steer people in the right direction and give them those incentives to realize, like, look, you can save a lot of money doing this by reducing your cost of inputs. You can improve water quality, and you can make sure that your soil is going to stay there for a much longer period of time. One last thing I note is that a couple years ago, University of Amherst in Massachusetts released a study that they predicted that we have only 60-some harvests left of our topsoil at current soil erosion rates and consumption rates. And so if farmers don't start implementing some of these practices, the implications can be really serious when we think about future generations in terms of what they can get out of their land. So land is expensive, it's valuable, and that is our primary objective, is to help make sure that these farmers and producers can make sure it's there for in perpetuity for multiple generations in the future.
Thank you so much to both of our presenters. It was much appreciated. There being no further business before the committee stands adjourned.